Hello everyone, welcome to Donald's World. And to kick off our Wellness Wednesday, my weekly segment about self-improvement, both in terms of physical health and mental health. And I'm here in Lagos, the commercial capital of Nigeria, as opposed to my normal location, which is Abuja, the political capital. I came here to enjoy the Christmas and New Year holiday period, and I'm staying with Boma, my friend, old friend, very distinguished lawyer. We're from the same place, and the Niger Delta. And I'm also with us today is Owen, a childhood friend, great girl. Here she is. She came to visit us, and while we were chatting away, we realized that Oma and Owen have something really, really important in common, and something really quite sad. And that is that they both lost their husbands at relatively young ages. And so instead of me rabbiting on and on, I'm going to ask each of them to briefly describe what happened. So let's start with our hostess. Oma, tell us.
Well, in my case, Patrick, because of the nature of his work, used to have very regular checkups, and they were always perfect, healthy, and all good. Yes, he was diabetic and hypertensive, but most Nigerians his age are, and they manage that. It's not usually life-threatening if it's properly managed. And so when it came as a rude shock when he was diagnosed with bile duct cancer, stage 4, and given less than 6 months, we went from healthy, planning our retirement in Portugal, to looking at, this short term of life. Our attitude, both of us, was, man isn't God. We're both of faith, and therefore we are going to look for alternatives and second opinions and so on. I became an expert.
So you got this diagnosis in Lagos?
No, in London.
In London, okay. When you went on holiday?
No, pretty well. He wasn't eating. I noticed that something was wrong. His appetite wasn't great. And I said, look, go back to because we've been to hospitals here, and they couldn't quite put a finger on what it was. So I said, please go back to your doctors and let them do a proper test. Let's see what it is. And that's happened in the COVID year. So literally was diagnosed, and then the world shut down. And I was shut down here, and he was shut down in England.
I remember that because when he passed, I had to watch it on a Zoom recording, because the number of people who were allowed into the church was very limited. And in fact, it was even in a different country. There was no travel that time. We weren't allowed to fly anywhere, and it was awful. I remember. Okay, so Owen, let's hear your story.
Okay, so my husband passed in 2017. He had actually survived cancer. He had survived cancer for 20 plus years. It wasn't cancer that took him, it was a bad heart. He was hypertensive and was not very good with taking his medications. And so after he passed, I actually threw away a lot of his pills that he should have taken. So he was hypertensive, and he wasn't intentional at all with what he ate. If you're hypertensive and you're not eating right and not taking your medication, then you are playing Russian roulette with your life, and that's what he did. And he eventually died of cardiac arrest in 2017.
Why do you think he didn't take his meds?
I'm not really sure. I think, no, he thought that he could manage his health by eating right, but he wasn't disciplined enough to eat right.
Okay, he's American.
Yeah, he was Black American. But, the thing is, with a lot of Black American people, there's a high incidence of high blood pressure, diabetes. He didn't have diabetes, but he had high blood pressure. But he didn't manage it, so He's gone.
Okay, so very sad. At one point, Owen and I were living, and John were living in the same hotel in Abuja. I didn't have proper residence then, and we used to have breakfast most days.
Yeah.
Actually, her husband had been a young friend of my father. So the whole thing came as a complete shock. I would go and come, I'd go back to London, spend a few months, and then come back to Nigeria to do work assignments. And whenever I came, the first thing I would do is call her and say, I'm back, let's do breakfast tomorrow in the hotel restaurant. And it came as a shock of it was a terrible shock to come and call you. And he said, I'm not there anymore, John's gone. I'm back in Lagos now with my parents. So that was how that happened. Okay, so, by the way, you're both showing me up, right? I look a mess. They both insisted on powdering their nose.
No, I didn't powder mine. I just used tissue to wipe my face. I just used tissue to wipe my face.
So,
I put lippy on too.
Well, Wellness Wednesday is also about beauty as well as health. So you're both doing very well, darlings. So, so I suppose what we really want to talk about now is how do you cope with bereavement? And then I think you were both in your 50s.
Yeah.
Right, which is pretty young to lose a husband. And interestingly, both of your husbands were quite a bit older than you. So the first question I should ask is, subconsciously at the back of your mind, did you not expect to be young widows?
I did not.
Certainly not. Because, like I said, Patrick was very fit. And he looked after himself. So I fully expected that we would retire together. When I retired, he was still there. And he was very much, around.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting to try.
So you weren't expecting to be widowed at young ages, 50s, pretty early. So how have you coped?
It was very tough in the first year, and in the second year I had to kind of, pull myself up because I got diagnosed with cancer, and so it was like I immediately, got into survival mode, and
so your own illness, in a way, distracted you from your loss.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that separately.
So
In another video.
Yeah.
So your main therapy, ironically, was self-care. What about you, Toma?
In my case, Patrick, he put me on this pedestal. He treasured me. He liked me to be happy. Nothing made him happy than to see me happy and enjoying myself. And I felt duty bound to carry. He wouldn't have wanted to see me like this. He's gone, he's at peace, you know where he is, because I keep saying that people have to have a personal faith. I knew that for me, he's definitely up there in the angels. This is not what he would have wanted. He would want to see you happy, dancing.
you like to dance?
Yes, I love to dance and enjoying myself with friends.
She's a dancing dervish. I tell you, it's just unbelievable.
That's exactly what I carried on doing, even though my heart was not in it. But you become intentional about getting on with doing the things that you used to enjoy. And after a while, you begin to enjoy them again.
Well, you're a very sociable person. And your life revolves around places like the Lagos Yacht Club, where you have a lot of friends, people who know you. And would you say that socializing was part of the therapy for you?
Absolutely. Friends are the family that God has given to us. And I have good friends who really love me as much as I love them. They're not transactional friends, and they're not pretentious at all. So they sort of cocoon me as well, as much as you need it. They're always there, and you're getting invited to dinner, you're getting invited to places, and if you wish to go, you do. And of course, you return the favor. And yes, that's it.
Well, I'd say that Owen, you're a more reserved sort of person. You're not
Yeah.
someone who's out dancing,
No.
socializing. She's not as gregarious as you. How did you cope? Other than taking care of your own health, which became a challenge shortly after John died. What kept you going?
I too have, friends, not as many as you. A couple, a few friends who were there for me, all over the world. I don't have many friends in one place. They're kind of, all over the place. And, they were very, very supportive. And, church as well also became a big factor in my life.
Let's talk about religion, because that is something that a lot of people derive great comfort from. I hasten to add, especially in Nigeria, because I do find that there's a very distinct difference between my European or non-Nigerian friends and my Nigerian friends, is that religion is more important here than it is. I mean, of course, there are religious people all over the world, but tell me, how did religion help you?
In my case, Patrick and I are Catholic. And of course, the Catholic Church is the same. That's why it's a Catholic Church. And knowing that he'd had the last rites 2 days before, because he was prepared.
So he went with equanimity.
Yes, he was prepared. He had been with the priest for 2.5 hours. He called the priest to his deathbed. The priest was the first person or the last person to sing. That gave me a lot of comfort. And when I was told that the priest was by his bedside when I was down here in Nigeria. And the first thing he said to me is that Patrick told him 2 days ago that he was ready. If the Lord chose to call him home. I said, well, he didn't tell me that. I said, well, he wouldn't tell you what. And then the process. So I sat with the priest in the church in London to talk about him, so that it was a personal requiem mass. He knew the person. He made reference to things about him, not just something personal service. The place he was buried, I chose that's the spot, beside a chapel at the church. And all of that, in doing all of that process, it helped with
It was therapy.
It was therapy. Putting him in a resting place where you felt he would rest, and all of that helped.
So he was buried abroad.
Yes.
Okay. But Nigerians are a bit superstitious about bringing bodies home, and there's always this folk wall about you can't bury them abroad. Did you get any of that?
Well, he was right here. On his 70th birthday, I said 2 things to him. I said, we don't have a will. We ought to do this thing. He said, I'm not writing a will. I tell you what I want to do with what I have. And that's exactly what he did. And he said, I only is what he proposed, maybe, which because my joy has come. If
Ayomite?
Yes.
Okay.
Wherever I fall, bury me.
Okay.
I don't believe in moving bodies back and forth. The earth is the same.
But did you get any pushback from his family or his children?
Incidentally, his children and grandchildren are all in England. So it was actually the perfect place.
So everybody
because they can
agrees.
visit.
Okay.
If you took him back to some village, God knows where, who would visit him there? Well, visit the grave there, but.
Tell me about it. I mean, I have enormous issues with moving people to ancestral villages, which their children rarely visit, and that's another story for another day. So, Owen, you also derived comfort from religion, but ironically, it was reversed. John was an American who was buried in Nigeria.
Yes.
Which is unusual.
Well, John also had always indicated that he wanted to be buried where he died. Although I did move him from Abuja to Lagos because I figured that I would be in Lagos and Lagos would give me easier access to his graveside. For me, religion was very important because I knew that despite the heartache I felt, with his passing, I knew that God still loved me, God loved him, and it was his time to go home. And John, himself, was partly to blame for leaving Earth at the time he did. He didn't take his medication, and like I said, if you are hypertensive, you don't take your medication, and you don't eat right, you're playing Russian roulette with your life. So anyone who's listening, it's food for thought. I hope. If you're not well, you've got to do what the doctors tell you to do.
So, all three of us, because I'm quite religious, perhaps not as religious as everybody, but we all believe that they are in a better place.
Yes.
As we're all sure about that. We don't believe that they've disappeared into some kind of void. We believe they've gone to a better place. They are with our Lord Almighty, and that we will see them again. Okay? Do we believe that?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Okay? And does that give comfort? The thought of seeing the person again?
No, not to that sense, because I don't believe that when you cross the divide, you will be this person that you are here, and your feelings and all of that will be what you have here. I don't think so. I think when the soul transcends, it transcends into a different plane entirely.
Okay, so you don't see yourself as being reunited with a man, your husband. You don't see your marriage continuing.
Not at all.
That's interesting. Because I see the afterlife as a continuation. Like, I was very close to my father, and my mother lived with me till she passed in 2023, and I just think we just carry on as we left off.
But then what happens to a woman, for instance, or man who remarries?
They have already told us. They have already told us not to remarry.
Who said?
Catholic Church.
Oh, really?
Your spouse was the first one.
No, that's not correct.
Unless it's divorce. If it's divorce. The church doesn't recognize divorce.
No, the church doesn't recognize. The church annuls.
Yes.
And post-annulment, you can be married.
That's true.
Because that is an annulment. And if you're widowed, you can remarry.
Well, that doesn't... I see what you're saying. So you could potentially become a polygamist in the afterlife.
No.
In about 3 or 4 Okay, all right. But I have really sad dreams about when my family was together and happy, my son. Even before I had my son and got married. Well, I have 2 sets of dreams. One is when I was happy in my marriage with my son. Another one is my childhood with my parents and my siblings. And I often wake up with tears pouring down my face, and so I always imagine that those situations will be duplicated, will be, that I will go back into them after we all pass away. But I honestly, I don't know. Who knows? Okay, so, what single piece of advice would you give to many other women in the world today? Some are younger than you, some are older than you, some are your age, who lose their life partner. Well, can you think of 1 or 2 things you would say to them that might be helpful to them, especially those who are going through it now?
It will get better. When it first happens, it's very raw, but it will get better. And if you've had a relationship in which your husband, liked you, your spouse liked you to be happy, being unhappy, for an endless amount of time is not going to make him happy if make them happy if they can see you. So, get on with your life and, get back to enjoying life. It will pass. I mean, mine happened 7 years ago and, I'm fine now.
But you told me that something very touching and interesting, that initially you used to go to the cemetery constantly to go and place flowers on John's grave and pray or spend time with him. And tell me what happened. Tell us.
So the attendants at the cemetery, said to me, "Madame, he's not there, he's not here, as if to say, get on with your life," kind of thing. And
It's only a body.
Yeah, it's just it's just his body that's there, and I would just smile. And I actually, withdrew a bit, but mainly because I was, traveling a lot, for my, cancer follow-up checkups. And I remember there was one time when I came back and I noticed a really, really, high number of graves, nearby John's, and it just made me very, very sad. And I thought, no, I can't do this, and so I stopped, going very often.
So what do? You now go just on the anniversary, perhaps?
I don't even do that. I don't necessarily go on the anniversary. I mean, I hadn't gone for like over 2 years, but a couple of weeks ago, I was in the same cemetery, so I went to his, graveside and said a prayer. But then again, it was very depressing because there were just too many new graves. And
what about you, Boma? Your husband is buried in another country, but you do visit that country often.
With Patrick, he was very clear. If anything happens to me, you must get on with your life, you must marry again, and so on and so forth. So there was no question that, if I had done anything else, it wouldn't have pleased him. That's one. And it doesn't help you, who's bereaved and left behind, to stay in your sack clothes and mourning ashes and so
widow's weeds, as they call them.
Not necessary. So in order to get there, the advice I would give to anybody who's currently dealing with bereavement of a loved one is something a friend's father said to me at the time. It didn't make sense, but as time went, it made perfect sense. He said, death is the only thing that gets smaller with time. So at that point when it happens, it's like unbelievable, it's large, but as time passes, time actually does hit. And the grief will go away, you will remember with laughter, and you realize that those who continue to live in your heart have actually never left you. And your loved ones live in your heart. And I hear Patrick's reaction to things that are happening in my life today. I hear his advice, I hear his encouragement. I see, where a comic situation when I'm, smiling, I can see his reaction to it. And that's certainly a comfort.
Okay, so never to be forgotten. Still a lot of pain about their passing, but it is bearable, and more so as time goes by. Is that a good way to?
Yes, it definitely gets better.
And also another thing that's comforting is that do you believe that they've reunited in the afterlife with people they loved who had already passed?
That's what you believe. I don't know that that's the case. I think
with
whatever happens there, it's a happy place. There's no question about it.
Yeah, but I don't know if
we can't use our experience here to begin to try and understand what goes on.
I've read a lot of stories about people having near-death experiences in operating theatres and hospitals, and they all seem, ones I've read, always seem to talk about some long tunnel, and there's a light at the end of it, and they get there and they see relatives who have passed.
Yeah, I've heard those too.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking about something so intimate and so difficult to process, even now, I'm sure. And life goes on. I'm delighted that you're still here, even if you've got pains in the neck.